Everything's basically the same. We still go to our regular positions, bake what we gotta bake, make what we gotta make. But now we just have this little extra things that we gotta think about, like what's gonna benefit everybody. 'Cause we think about everyone now. We don't just think about ourselves. And I think that's real beauty in it. It's like bringing more people together and like a community. I mean, I know that sounds like cheesy, but I don't know. It just feels that way, like it feels like a dream come true in a way. Yeah, it's awesome. Like I know we started our 401k plan, so we're just thinking of ways to help better people in their personal lives and in our work lives all around.
So you just started a 401k plan. How many bakeries do you think have 401k plans?
Not many small businesses that I can think of. It's mostly like corporate restaurant groups that would have benefits like that. I think, especially within hospitality, given how much of a head down and just constant drive to work experience it is, it's nice to have a different flavor to come back to other than just doing like creative menu development constantly. One thing I really appreciated is the level of transparency that comes along with ownership. Like, for example, we're going through some transitions with staff right now, and instead of having things be hush-hush and, one small group of people trying to figure out how to fill in the gaps and solve those problems, there's been a lot more conversation going on. And as anybody who's worked in a small business knows, like nothing stays secret for long. There's constant conversation about everything, but the approach has been less of like, how do we make this as like smooth as possible and figure this out, to more strategizing between different parties. Like, hey, this role, the former person in that's been really stressed and overworked. Like, what can we do to maybe break that up and make it more feasible for the next person that comes in? Or like, who do you think within our team would be a good fit for that? And this is happening between like management, it's happening between staff, between the board of directors. And so it's been nice to have what feels like an overall supportive effort to try to put the best person into that position. And I've never seen that happen outside of this experience before. So it's been really gratifying. Yeah.
I want to give a little bit of both sides. I told David I was going to do that. So I started at Giroux when I was 22, and for full transparency, I took the job because it paid me 50 cents more than what I was making at my previous job. And they gave me this whole spiel about ESOP and, this, and you're going to get this for retirement. I didn't hear anything that they told me. I was like, where do I sign the paperwork so I can make an extra 50 cents? At 22, it's a big deal, But they sent me to this employee owner conference, and it really sparked something that was in me about what my dad or I've seen in my parents when you watch them like work at a company and they spend all this time there, the work ethic that, got instilled in me. I'm like, it's kind of making sense. So every day, the way it translates is I have my day job and I know what I need to do for that. But then it's like, that's just not enough. So how can I think of, let's solve this problem now, but how can I solve it for the future? Because if they're not being efficient, I'm not efficient. I don't want to do something twice. So how can we all work together to get to that, right? And we're also pretty transparent with our numbers as a company as well, which I think is kind of neat, as much as possible, obviously. But when we're looking at that, it also gives me a sense of, okay, so if I'm saving even 0.5% on something, how does that translate to the bottom line? And how does that affect my ESOP stock at the end of the year when we're evaluated? And then the way I look at it now too is when I look at my statement that I get every year, which I just started opening the envelope last year, 10 years in now, I was like, oh, wow, I have money in there. Like, this is cool. Now I'm like, all right, that's money that I don't put in, right? Like, I don't do anything. I get a paycheck. I work as best as I can in my role. And that's free money. I get to do whatever I want that for retirement. And then we also do have a 401k, which is really neat too. So I can decide what I want to do with that. So I get 2 forms of retirement in this company that I work for. And I talked to some people, just like said, small businesses, like the 401ks are not always there. So it's pretty neat.
So yeah, I think the word that's coming to mind for me is powerful. Like, I think it feels really powerful to be part of our employee co-op because, as everyone so far who's spoken has pointed out, we have just total transparency. So, we are all aware of what this company is bringing in and where our challenge points are and what we need to improve on. And we have many, many different shows on our network, and a lot of us producers are kind of working independently in small teams of one or, a couple people and their hosts. And, we're kind of just on our own little, our own little islands. And we're not thinking about, or we're not constantly thinking about, like, how does what I'm doing affect what another show is doing? And, like, how does what I'm doing affect what the business team is doing? And, it's really nice to have, like, aside from the general reason of collaboration is always going to make your business better. I think, not that I'm a business person, but, like, having that collaboration is wonderful, but having that, like, mission of our co-op and knowing that we are collaborators because of because of our worker ownership. Yeah, honest communication is what Jacqueline just said. All of that really helps. So, it's not something that changes my day to day, but, it does, it like gives me more to think about, when I'm making decisions about, like, what to do with our show, or, like, when we have our fundraisers every year, like, how does what I'm doing, how can I loop in other people? Because if we're succeeding, then the rest of the company is succeeding, and the rest of my fellow co-worker owners are succeeding.
So Maximum Fun has always done business in a really different way than our competitors and our peers, right? The entertainment industry is really weird. And the podcasting industry has been particularly weird over the last decade as it's gone through a lot of booms and busts related to huge amounts of speculative capital from larger entertainment companies and from media companies, Spotify and Amazon and Apple and so forth. And my goal with Maximum Fun was always, how do we build something that doesn't have to scale infinitely? How do we build something that is sustainable? How do we build something that supports work that we think is really good, but we don't think is going to become Joe Rogan and have, 10 million people and a lot of ayahuasca or whatever? And we're not anti-ayahuasca. Yeah, I'd hate to alienate any ayahuasca enthusiasts in the audience.
But we are recording.
Okay. I'm a professional podcaster. I've said much worse things while things were recording. But for me, it was always, what is the business structure that can support this work long term, right? I always wanted to do this as my life's work, essentially. And I wanted my friends whose work I love to be able to do it as their life's work. And so when I considered selling, the central consideration was there was no one I was going to sell to who was going to maintain those values, and there was no one I was going to sell to who was going to retain our employees. And so the question, and our employees, people like Jen and Bikram, were people who were working extra hard for less money because they also believed in the same principles. And, you have to work extra hard when you're working on something that isn't going to be the most financially successful thing. It's going to be medium financially successful. And so for me, as I have transitioned from founder to worker ownership, the thing that I am the most grateful for is that what was my responsibility, or to some extent a responsibility that I shared with Bikram, who was our managing director for many years, is now something that we all share amongst each other. And it's this responsibility for building and sustaining something that we actually really believe in. It's not happenstantial that we work here. It's not happenstantial that we do this work. And this system allows, both allows the business structure to reflect our values and also allows us to build something values-driven that is sustainable in the long term in a way that might not otherwise be possible. Like my father worked for decades as an organizer and in nonprofits. And in the end, I think his feeling was, gosh, I wish I had built something that sustained itself without charity. And because he believed in the mission, but he wanted it to be able to, he wanted the car to drive itself, right? And often when we do something that we care about, we do it just by sacrificing. And instead, this gives us the opportunity to build something together that can be sustainable long term. So because, as with your founder, I felt like it was my legacy, it's the thing that I've spent the last 25 years of my life doing. I feel really good about sharing it with these people that I love and care about and value and trust. And that's the biggest feel difference for me, is that instead of feeling like at the end of the day, it's like a paternalistic, like I have to take care of these people, or somebody might lose their house, or if something goes wrong, I might lose my house. Instead, I feel like I'm sharing something with everyone and that we're all really truly working together. And I'm not a benevolent dictator or something, but actually we're all making the choices together.
I just want to add to, we just had someone that, I know we haven't been employee owned for this long, but the legacy part, we just had an employee owner retire after 30 years. And at the end of this month, there's going to be another one at 31. So like to be, when, you don't really, even 20 years, you don't really hear that anymore too. So
yeah, my father-in-law, he didn't go to college. He was one of the smartest, hardest working guys I know. He didn't go to college. He worked retail at this hardware store, right out of high school. He worked at a hardware store, and he went to Jackson's 30 years ago. He just retired. And one of the things that I saw from the minute I started dating my wife, we've been together since we were 17, was that this was an operation that was built for the benefit of the people who work there, right? That, it's a huge hardware store. People went and bought their lumber there or whatever because they knew that. And I felt, like when I was 19, I was with my wife at the time, we were dating still. And every other year, Jackson's brought all its employees on a trip to Hawaii. And they said, your children and their partners can come too. So I went to Hawaii with everyone that works at Jackson's. And I felt that feeling that now that my father-in-law has retired just 6 months ago, I think, gosh, how many people who work retail their entire career get an opportunity to have a real career, to have something that they're invested in with their coworkers, that they benefit from that investment. And ultimately, not only did he have a full career, he also had a full and productive retirement that he never would have had the opportunity to do it. He stayed at the hardware store he worked at, for the 5 years before he went to Jackson's.
In a way, the transition had the smallest change on my day-to-day insofar as I was always worried about the business before, and I'm still worried about the business today.
Yeah. Vikram, I always kept the book secret from you as CEO previously.
But the thing that I was not anticipating and that really hit me as I was going over this year's budget with the worker owners, and we had a set of small group meetings where I was like, okay, so this is how our P&L looks. This is what I'm expecting for this year. This is why this number looks like that. Is a lot of what the other folks on the panel have said, that degree of transparency is great. I'm assuming it's great for you all. For me, as somebody who historically held that information myself and bore the burden of that, frankly, myself, it's been so wonderful to feel like I can share that with the people I work with, the people whose lives are impacted by it, that we are in this together, and that I really feel as though we are now part of a team. It's similar to what Jesse has said. We are now part of a team that's working on this problem together, and we all have different roles, and our roles are continuous with what they were before, but we all see the bigger picture and are able to support each other. There's a loneliness in being at the top of a small business. Like there's a loneliness in operating that, and I feel much less of that loneliness now.
Yeah, I think something that all three of our businesses share is that I don't think there are many people who got into any of our businesses because they were looking for a career in managing capital, right?
Right.
All of us are in our work because we're workers, right? In various ways. I'm sure there's a lot of tradespeople of various kinds that work in glazing. There's people who went to culinary school and people who've worked in kitchens since they were 16, working in baking. So many of our people got into our business because of creativity, right? And when Bikram and I were running the company together, Bikram came to us because while his background was in business consulting, he really wanted to do something he believed in. And I know that's why I was running a business, because And so I think there is something really special for us in being able to share both the gifts of running a business and the responsibilities of running a business. That a producer like Jennifer previously did not have a reason to read a P&L. And so the fact that Jennifer and our fellow board members, and to some extent other members of the cooperative, are involved in the business side because it is in their interest to be, is a really big deal, and is very meaningful to the operation of our company. That those skills are now distributed, those skills and responsibilities and gifts are distributed among many more people.
Yeah.
This is obviously true for every business, but at least within food, I can't tell you the number of times I've seen single proprietor business owners just like crumble under the stress of what owning a restaurant does to you. And so I kind of swore it off to myself for a while. I was like, I'm never going to do that. Like the cost just isn't worth it for a little bit of notoriety. And so when the opportunity at Proof kind of came along, it just seemed so just logical and like the best step forward. It was like, wow, if you can just take all of that burden and put it on 20 some people, like that just instantly makes it so much easier, right? And obviously like it takes a while to get there. I think one of the biggest hurdles we've had is like warming everybody up to the amount of like agency that they have and like what's possible, and how much of a say you can have in things. And yeah, at the end of the day, like decisions don't feel as scary because it's not all on your shoulders. And to me, that's one of the biggest reasons why I continue to stay, is because I'm like, you know what, we aim high and we strive for a lot, but at the end of the day, like I'm not on the chopping block if I make a mistake because everybody's got the same amount of buy-in on this.
So something, David, that we saw in our industry in the last few years is as the industry has gone through a few rounds of shocks, as the kind of speculative capital dried up, and then there was a big advertising shock a year and a half or so ago, a lot of the creative people in our industry have unionized. I think that is really wonderful and productive. But I think that because we were able to transition to worker ownership, the kind of fear and distrust that drove workers to say, we need to protect ourselves, is unnecessary in our shop. I mean, there exist, obviously, worker-owned companies with unions, but I think the reason that we didn't have to go that route, spend our resources in an adversarial situation, is because rather than me asking the employees to say, trust me, I'm a good guy, I'm a very good guy. But, but like, rather than me asking that of my employees, rather than me saying to Jennifer, Jen, we went to college together. Like, I'm trustworthy, right? That transparency and that distribution of responsibility means that everyone feels comfortable trusting each other in a way that wouldn't be possible otherwise.